We're having this live stream presentation tonight in collaboration with the Los Alamos Mountaineers. And this virtual event is being brought to you by Pajarito Environmental Education Center, that's PEAK. And we operate the Los Alamos Nature Center. And we actually opened this month. The Nature Center is now open to the public with some shortened hours. So you can check our website, that's peaknature.org, for our current hours and for more live streamed presentations like this one. And I just want to give a quick shout out to our wonderful members and donors, volunteers, and all of my fellow staff who really have made this all possible and just been amazing supporters over the past year. And yeah, we're excited to get the Nature Center back open and soon, someday, have in-person programming again. With that, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Tony to start the Mountaineers meeting.
Okay, so I'm Tony Taylor. I'm actually the Vice President of the Mountaineers. Melanie couldn't make it tonight. So I want to welcome everyone to our Earth Week meeting. A couple of announcements. We're now posting our board meeting minutes on lamountaineers.org. We are going to have a trash pickup contest or reward. So in honor of Earth Week, you can win a prize for picking up 2 bags full of trash. You need to send us your picture picking up the trash. So the next thing I'm going to do is announce the Raffle Winners. Juliana Fessenden is actually our members chair, and she did this, but she couldn't make it tonight. Then we will have the trip report and new trips by Cecile, and the main presentation will be introduced by Rod McCready. So in terms of our exciting Los Alamos Mountaineers April Raffle Winners, they are Robin Guruli, Patricia Hubley, Laura Bond, Ray Kramer, and Sarah Goodell. So these were actually selected randomly by Juliana for the people, looking at the people who had renewed their memberships in 2021. And so there are a number of prizes that folks can choose from. There are Los Alamos t-shirts, our social distancing t-shirts, sweatshirts, socks, and a number of books. So Juliana will contact you to find out what your choice is for a prize and to figure out how to get the prize to you. So with that, I'll pass it on to Cecile.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the April meeting of the Los Alamos Mountaineers. So I have four club-sponsored activities to present tonight that happened during the months of April. In early April, Bill Podorski took 6 people to the Ojito Wilderness, where they find some beautiful hoodoos and rock formations. On April 10th, Ellen Rose took a large group to the top of Cabezon. So Cabezon is a large volcanic plug rising above the floor of the Rio Puerco Valley. And the climb includes a fourth class section and an overall very steep terrain, but everyone made it to the top and back down to their cars. Olivia Lee took a group of 6 hikers to the little known Nombe Badlands. So they're just about 30-minute drive east of Los Alamos. And they found also some really interesting rock formations, including a window rock. And Bill just came back from Grand Staircase Escalante, where he led a llama trip, and I'm gonna let him talk about it now.
So, twice, oops, we lost the slide. Twice a year, we tend to organize ourselves and go on a trip to the Canyon Country, which is the land of bare rock and canyons and little oases. And we're not very hardworking, so we have llamas, like the one in this picture, haul our gear. Now, I'll talk about the usual format in the new trip that I'm announcing for the fall. This was a bit more rugged. It was along the above and along the Escalante River, about 30 miles south of Escalante, Utah, and it was a trek. So we spent 12 days, 11 nights in the wilderness, went from through 5 camps, one to another, covered a great deal of ground. And it was a strenuous and beautiful outing, and you can get a feel of the scenery, the sunset, the flowers, which are just coming out that time of year, and our faithful llama helpers from the pictures that I'm sharing with you. This is one of my favorite places in the world. I go back many times, and I'll be talking about the next adventure there in a minute. Back to you, Cecile.
Thank you, Bill. That looks amazing. So now for the individual trips, so we have a variety of activities, including still some snow-covered trails. That was actually late March. Ellen and Joy hiked Camazon Trail and Pipeline Road. John and Jen hiked and rafted through the Grand Canyon. Larry and Laura Cox went to Southeast Arizona and to do some bird watching there, and that's Laura crossing the San Pedro there on that picture. Sylvie, Jean, and Zach went canoeing on the Rio Chama, and they had to share the river with a cow, a black cow, at some point. Paul hiked Cook's Peak in southern New Mexico near Deming, sorry. And 8 mountain bikers spent 2 days riding on the Quebradas backcountry byway. And France and Chris hiked in the Chihuahua New Mexico National Monument in Arizona. And Evan sent this picture of hoodoos he found in the Guaje Canyon. So upcoming trip, back to you, Bill.
So, yeah, so of course, there'll be a lot of smaller trips popping up. Watch your email for the day trips that a number of people are putting together per what Cecile just told you. Some bigger trips planned out there. Moab is staying in a 10-bedroom facility. That's got a waiting list of a couple at this point, but you're welcome to get on the waiting list. The Selway River is a commercial raft trip in a very wild part of Idaho, put on by Hughes River Outfitters. We've had great times with them. It's 5 or 6 nights on the canyon. That trip is full, but this is sort of the moment. That is, we just got the email saying, okay, if you're in, time to pay in full. So this is the point at which the participants will be separated from the non-participants, and where someone on the list ought to speak up to be ready to grab a slot if it emerges. Just announced, or I haven't even announced it, look for a Mountaineer email on your Mountaineers email in the next day or two. We will go back to the Escalante country, not far from the trip that I just talked about. We will do that in mid-October, which is a perfect time of year, and we'll explore the domes and canyons and slick rock as we always do. And easier than a multi-night trip, what we'll do is we'll go in to a base camp. We'll spend 6 nights there, which means 5 days hiking, exploring, and after each day of hiking, we'll make our way back to a very comfortable base camp for dinner and wine, and we all help each other. We all cook, we all do chores and so on. But it's a very comfortable way to explore this wildly beautiful and exotic country?
I met Luke mountain biking, but pretty early in our adventure that day, the fact that he is a climber came up. He was born, or at least raised, here in Los Alamos and graduated from the high school in 1993. He told me he started climbing around 1990 while he was in high school. He and some buddies of his thought it looked interesting, and they learned from a friend how to do it safely. And he said they were involved in some way, maybe not members, but involved in the Mountaineers even back then. And that they went to some of the talks, did some of the Mountaineers trips. And he said a fellow named Gary Clark, who some of the longtime members may remember, gave a particularly inspiring slideshow one time. So I think Luke feels like this is sort of coming full circle. Now he's doing a great slideshow. Luke is a former editor of Climbing magazine. He established many of the climbing routes around town that you may know. He mentioned Loose Cannon at the Dungeon as one that he was pretty proud of. I thought when I first met Luke, he told me he had been a dirtbag, for those of you familiar with that term. So I asked him about it the other day, and he told me that he sort of doesn't really even feel worthy of the name dirtbag, that real dirtbags are far more committed to that lifestyle than he was. But anyway, he's very committed to climbing and spent months at a time finding friends' backyards and couches to sleep on. So I think we would consider him a dirtbag, even if he doesn't consider himself. So with no further ado, let's welcome Luke Laeser.
All right, thanks for the introduction, Rod. Yes, Rod recruited me for this, so he's definitely the one to thank. I also want to thank Gene at Pack 8 for scanning 100 slides for me so you all can see these, and of course Beth for teaching me how to use Zoom, which I really haven't ever done that much. So as Rod said, I grew up here in Los Alamos. If anyone here has kids my age, they may know my dad, who taught computer science at the high school for some time. And if you are about my age, you may, and have kids in high school, you may have met my wife, who teaches at the high school now. So grew up climbing when I was in high school, and I'm going to arrow through some photos that are sort of funny, some early 1990s stuff. I'm not going to talk about many of these, just to show you basically how excited we were to go rock climbing in high school, which basically carried us, me and a group of about 6 friends. This is learning to aid climb on the retaining wall behind the Pueblo school. In high school, I met this guy who's also from Los Alamos, who did some Mountaineers trips, as Cameron Burns. Taught me the value of doing first ascents. I learned a lot from this guy and did a lot of crazy aid climbs. One of the silly ones we did was in Ghost Ranch. We called this Count Ruidolfo after a children's drawing that we saw at the museum there. I think we spent 5 attempts trying to figure out how to climb this thing. We eventually got to the top of it using something we called a hoop stick to lasso the top of it. This is out in Navajo Reservation, Venus Needle. Another guy, some of you might know, this guy's John Butler, went to high school with him. He actually gave a slide presentation at the Mountaineers sometime in the early 90s. Spent a lot of time climbing with this guy and followed him to school in Grand Junction so that we could go climb in the desert. And we did a lot of climbing in the desert, a lot of aid climbing, and did a lot of new towers. And we're obsessed with the desert. This is my wonderful wife, Melissa, who also did a little climbing in the early 90s. I've known her since 4th grade. And also from Los Alamos. So I'm showing some photos of some New Mexico stuff here. As we make it into the mid 90s, eventually I met this guy who some other people in the audience may know. This is Ed Strang. This guy taught me the value of athleticism in rock climbing. This guy was a gymnast, one of the strongest climbers I've ever known. He lives in Santa Fe now and is responsible for lots of great first ascents all over New Mexico. Him and his brother are terrific climbers and good people, still outside climbing. This is Ed climbing in Grand Junction. Did some traveling around Europe, in Yosemite, all over the West. Another good friend of mine, Tom here. Here's some Devil's Tower. There's Rich Strang, another Santa Fe climber some of you may know. Built some trails at Pajarito. Another picture of Rich there. Some Fontainebleau. Some Aconcagua. And eventually here we are, how we arrive in Basa, Sayachi, which is what I'm going to talk about tonight. This guy in the middle here, Peter Baumeister, I met in Yosemite, and we spent 6 days climbing the nose. And after that trip, we stayed in touch. And in 2001, we decided to take a trip to Mexico to go investigate a climbing area that he had read about and seen some pictures of that is in Chihuahua, which is our neighbor to the south, just over the border. If you drive straight south down I-25, go through El Paso, pass through Juarez and keep going straight south over the border, you'll end up in Chihuahua City. From there, you take a right, turn west, go through Cuauhtemoc, and then start climbing up into the mountains, into the Sierra Madre Occidental Mountains, to a park they call Basa Sayachi or Basa Sayachi. This adding the C on the end of the name, some people do, some people don't. When we went there the first time, everybody added the C. It seems like lately, even on Google Maps, they don't add the C, so it's without the C. And there's other Tarahumara names that have many of that same spelling at the end. So at least 20 years ago, when you arrived at the park, it's nothing like a national park you might experience here in the United States. There's no park service. There's not a lot of signs and documentation really even saying where you are. So this is the main parking area, right at the main entrance to the park. And this is the typical scene that you might see on your average day. So right here at the parking area, you stroll down maybe a 5-10 minute walk down the creek, and you arrive at the mouth of a giant waterfall. And here are my two partners in crimes of this trip. This is Peter. This is about 4 years after we met in Yosemite, and his good friend Dirk, who I'd never met Dirk before, but Peter and I had planned this trip, and he's really the mastermind behind this project. So this is the Cascada de Basa Sayachi, which is an absolutely gorgeous waterfall. I think now they call it the second highest waterfall in Mexico. When we first visited, I think they called it the third. So maybe they decided one wasn't as big. The route that we decided to climbs an arête left of the waterfall. You can see a very striking arête with a big right shadow to the right of it. And we easily eyed this as one of the nicest looking features on the wall, far enough away from the waterfall so that there wasn't too much vegetation. And arêtes are always gorgeous to climb on. And it looked like it had some pretty nice rock on it, and you get a really good view from where that last photo was taken. And you can take a pair of binoculars and scope it out pretty good. Here's a better shot of the wall. You can see the route pretty much, it's about 1,000 feet long and climbs mostly on the arête the whole way up. So when we first went down there, our primary mission objective, what we had thought we wanted to climb, was the great feature in the area, which is called El Higante. And this photo that we're looking at here, we actually didn't see the first time we were out there. We didn't even know how to get to the wall. It took us meeting the right local to even show us how to get out there. But this is basically what we wanted to do, is this. If you can look on the right side of the photo, there's kind of a giant diamond-like face that's mostly shaded. And we arrived there in the winter time, and it would have been miserably cold. Face only sees about 4 or 5 hours of sun in the summertime. In the wintertime, it would have been very, very cold. Over to the left of this, on the left side of the canyon, is the highest waterfall in Mexico. They call the Piedra Velada, the falling stone, and it often is dry. And I think in this photo, you can't even see any water on it. Here's another shot of the wall with some nice evening light on it. Here's a shot of Peter and Dirk. But I think before we started actually climbing on the wall, we walked through the canyon and just looked at how many climbing objectives there were in this canyon. There's a lifetime of rock in here. Most of it very difficult to get to, somewhat inaccessible, but tremendous potential and a really beautiful wilderness area. But after a few days we were there, we had chosen this arête as the line to do. So since we were at the top of the canyon and we knew we wanted to do a bolted climb, we basically hauled all our gear up to the top of this cliff and started working our way down it, placing bolts for protection and cleaning loose rock off and working our way down the wall. So this is a shot of Peter starting down the wall. And if you look just up and to the left of the waterfall, you can see the viewpoint. And a lot of times when you're on the wall, there are tourists there watching and sometimes yelling at you. Here's a shot of Dirk taken with a long telephoto lens, and you can see him working. I'm guessing this would be maybe the 8th pitch. So we had about a month to work on this route, and I think we spent all of 3 weeks cleaning this route, going up and down the ropes. One or two people would wrap down the wall and try to figure out where the route should go, swinging left and right, cleaning off loose rock, try to keep the ropes from getting cut, and placing bolts. Very tedious, difficult, dirty process, often very slow going. Does not help your climbing to spend all your time hanging in your harness, hanging from the rope. It's very tiring. But we do try to have as much fun as we can while we're out there. swinging around on the ropes and climbing a little bit when we can, but a lot of it is just trying to clean the rock up and try to make a nice route for climbing. And while you're doing this, one of the great benefits of being on rappel is being able to safely clean off loose rocks, so that as other climbers are coming up a wall like this, they don't have to deal with loose rock. But unfortunately, that you can't always make routes like this as safe as possible. And the next route I want to talk about, logical progression. Unfortunately, last year, a well-known climber and a very experienced climber died on our route, logical progression, the route I'm going to talk about next. And, you know, one of the benefits of rappelling down the wall is that you can, you know, try to clean routes and make them as safe as possible. But there, you know, you can't always do that. It's always going to be dangerous. And even though climbs are bolt protected, you know, you think that sometimes provides an element of safety, because it takes one of the risks out of the equation of placing your own gear. But it is a horrible tragedy that this guy, Nolan Smith, fell and pulled a block off the wall, and it cut his rope, and he fell about 1,000 feet. And his partner, Aaron Livingston, was stuck on the wall, and luckily he had a sat phone, and a group was able to come in and rescue him. Really a horrible accident. So this is what we try to do when we put up routes, is to try to make them as safe as possible and clean things like this off the wall. And it helps, but it's still a dangerous place to be. So here's a shot, Pete. I think after that block was pulled, and you can see as the waterfall's coming down, the spray will blow over on you, and it often creates these beautiful rainbows. And after spending 3 weeks on this route, we started to come up with this idea to name the route something with a rainbow title. And actually, after we got back, my dad, who's very fluent in Spanish, helped us come up with the name Subiendo el Arco Iris, which means ascending the rainbow. So while we were bolting the route, we took a few rest days, and we were able to do a little bouldering around the top of the waterfall. And, you know, right by the cul-de-sac parking area, there's some really wonderful boulders just right by the parking area. Here's a shot of deer climbing on one. And down at the bottom of the canyon, there's plenty of boulders there. This is a shot of Peter by Dirk climbing on some beautiful stone right by the waterfall. So right at the park cul-de-sac there at the top, they have some little quartos to rent. Very cheap. I think we paid $5 a night or something like that for a couple beds with this nice wood stove. And with the long winter nights, it was very nice to not be outside camping. It was quite comfortable, and it was just a 10-15 minute walk right down to the waterfall from here. Very, very convenient setup. I have no idea what it's like now, but if you're there when it's not too busy, this is a great way to stay comfortable. Here's a view of the viewpoint. The waterfall goes right off to the left there. Here's a view from a ledge we call the Hilton Ledge. This is at the top of pitch 8, which is about level with the top of the falls, you can see there. So after about 3 weeks of work, you can see from this photo, after cleaning loose rock off the wall, it kind of takes a toll on the vegetation at the base. I imagine now that it's healed up, and you probably wouldn't be able to know that this had happened a few years ago. But it is sort of a dangerous place to be at the base of the wall while this is happening. Luckily, we were always very careful to make sure that there was no one down there. And if we suspected that people were down there, we pretty much had to stop all work cleaning loose rocks off like this. About that time, we were done pretty much equipping the route. We got quite a snowstorm. We were very surprised to see that it could actually snow this much there, but it is at about 7,000 feet. The climate looks a little bit like Los Alamos. The trees are actually a Chihuahua pine, I think, and the oak is a little different, so sort of a larger oak leaf. But it is a very dry pine forest at about the same elevation as Los Alamos, and we got quite a good snowstorm while we were there. It looked like it probably snowed about 6 inches or something. So some shots of us actually climbing on the route. This is on the first pitch. The climb ended up being 10 pitches long with 2 pitches of 513, couple pitches of 512, some 511, and a little bit of 510. Very difficult. We were not able to red point a couple of the pitches because they were so difficult. And a team later on was able to make the first free ascent. I'll talk about that a little later. But this first pitch is absolutely beautiful, a little over 100 feet long, climbs a little bit of a crack with some thin face moves. Here's a shot of Peter on pitch 2, really neat 12A, very thin, pulls a little bulge right here with a kind of a difficult slab move right there. The next pitch, the third pitch, here's another shot, Peter on pitch 2 here with the waterfall in the background. The third pitch we thought was the crux. We were thinking it was 13A-ish, broke a few holds while we were working on it, had a really difficult 12 plus, 10, 20 degree overhanging start for 20 feet. And then a very hard vertical, even slightly less than vertical slab move, finished out with some technical moves. And then it went into the fourth pitch here was some beautiful 511 minus climbing. There's a shot at Pete getting blasted by some waterfall spray with the nice rainbows. A shot of Dirk working his way up this beautiful arete. This is about the best effort we managed on the next Kruk pitch. This is, I believe, pitch 6, which we thought was also about 13A. The party that made the first free ascent of this in the next year, I think they graded it 13B. It was a long, little over 100 feet long, overhang for most of the way, very sustained climbing, not too much of a defined crux, but very pumpy, absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous climbing. I think it has had like 14 bolts or something on it. Very long, sustained pitch. This pitch is the 9th pitch, next to the last. Another absolutely stunning arete pitch with some golden, beautiful golden lichen. I think this is 11D. A shot of Dirk. Climbing Magazine ran this about 2002-ish, I think, right before we went down to do the next route. This is the final pitch. Absolutely stunning. 511, I think it's 11B. A little shorter, only maybe 6 bolts long, maybe only 60 feet. absolutely perfect erect climbing on perfect rock. One of the reasons why this route is just so stunning. The last pitch just gives you some just beautiful climbing. These shots by Dirk with his telephoto. And after all that, we cleaned all our gear off the route, which we had water bottles and quick draws and beaners and all kinds of stuff there. Here's a shot of Dirk took of me pulling all the stuff off the route so that we could make our trip back home. And that was it. It was a beautiful trip. We had a month. We had a month to do this route. I think we spent almost all of it working on the route so that we only had a few days to really try to climb it. It's a very challenging route. When Peter and Dirk returned to Germany, they talked to some other climbers about their experience there. And one of them is a very, very famous German climber named Stefan Glovac. Anybody's ever seen the book Rocks Around the World? It's a absolutely stunning picture book. Stefan Glovac is a true rock star. This guy has climbed all over the world. He's done 514s in 20 countries. He's done big walls and all kinds of climbing. This guy heard about the area and said, wow, this looks amazing. I want to go down there and check this out. So after our trip, he was ready to go, and he planned a trip within 6 months and launched down there with 6 people, huge expedition. Their goal was to go and do El Higante like we did. And the first thing that they did when they went down there was made the first free ascent of our route, Subiendo El Arco Iris. They called it 13B. Stefan on-sighted, I think, probably almost all of it. If he fell, I'm sure, repeated it or reled the pitch almost immediately. I think he was with a couple other people, Holger Huber and Grunda Fruweld. And then the next day, Kurt Albert and Hans Gotz, they made the second free ascent of the route, the third ascent of the route. Kurt Albert, if you've ever heard the term red point, he's the one who coined that very famous climber. So it was an honor to have these rock stars make the first free ascent of our route. So after they did that, they went to El Higante with the goal of kind of doing what we wanted to do, which was a giant bolt protected route that climbed the big face on El Higante. They got about 6 pitches up the route, and their drills died, which basically meant that their original plan of making a bolt protected route was a total failure, and there was no way for them to do that. So they did 6 pitches of bolt protected climbing and then sort of weaved together any crack system that they could after that. And basically, from what we gathered, they just tried to get off the wall and finish their route as quickly as they could. And the rest of their route, they were not able to get the climbing that they wanted out of it. So I think they kind of considered that part of their trip a failure, but they were still able to do a new route on the wall, even though it wasn't the style of route that they wanted. So we had heard that, and we still wanted to go down there and finally do the route that we had envisioned the first time we went there, which was a giant bolt protected route on the largest face in Mexico. This wall is almost the size of El Capitan. It's almost 3,000 feet tall. It's an absolutely giant wall in a fairly remote location. And to do that, we would need more time. So we had 2 months this time. And we were going to need more bolts, multiple drills, and a lot of psych to get down there and get this job done. So in February of 2002, Peter knew somebody else who was also interested in doing this. And we went down there with Bert Van Lent from Belgium and Peter Baumeister and myself, and took a look at this giant wall and decided we wanted to climb a route right through the middle of it. So we went out with binoculars to basically take a look at it and figure out from a distance where it looked like the nicest place to climb was. And you know, when you look at something like this from a distance, it's almost impossible to tell exactly what it's like. The only way to really see it is to get on it. And we decided, because of our success on the previous route, coming in from the top was potentially the easiest, the safest, and the best way to yield a route like we wanted to do, which was fully bolt protected. We were well aware of the fact that establishing a route on a 3,000 foot face, top down, all rappel bolted, would be considered absolutely just horrible from every climber with any kind of ethical backbone. But we didn't really care, because we thought the final product is really the only thing that matters. So we went ahead with our plan. So here's a picture of Peter with a gas-powered Ryobi drill. We thought this was a good way to have a backup in case we had any problems charging our power drill. Behind Peter, you can see 2 big solar panels that we used to power the charging station for the drill batteries, and have lights and listen to music and have some power out in the middle of the wilderness. We took 400 stainless steel bolts with us, which we used almost all of. I think in total, we ended up placing about 380. I think I still have a couple left. I think Peter took a few home with him. One of the problems that we ran into on the first trip was that we did not know how to get to the wall. We never even saw it on our first trip. We learned that this guy right here, Don Fernando, is a master of the area. He's been through all the canyons and knew exactly the best way to get out there. So I think we paid him $20, and he spent the day with us and rode in our truck and took us out to the parking spot to get out to the top of the wall. It takes about, from the village of Basa Sayachi, where we were on the previous trip, where the top of the waterfall is, you drive logging roads, some of which get pretty rough 4x4. It takes about 2 hours, all dirt, unmarked, sometimes going down roads that look like people's, the back behind their houses. It's extremely confusing, and I would not recommend anyone try to do it without a guide. I read recently that guides now charge about $200 to actually just drive you straight to the top of the wall. Kind of maybe because it's a little more popular than it used to be, that's maybe the price you have to pay. So driving that road takes you to a point right about here, which gives you about a 1 hour hike to walk to the summit. They call it the Devil's Backbone, and it follows this arête that takes you out to the summit of El Higante. Looking left is going down canyon. And if you follow that down Canamina Canyon, eventually that would join into the Rio Mayo, which comes out of Copper Canyon. And then out the right side of the photo, about a 4-hour hike will take you to the Cascada de Basa Sayachi. So with Don Fernando, he showed us how to drive out there, hiked out to the top with us, kind of showed us the route that they use to hike up to this wonderful place. So that day with him, we just took a light hike out there, checked it out, figured out how the access was. And basically this is the top of the formation right here. Absolutely beautiful island in the sky. Got to do a little 4th class scramble to get up onto the top of it. 360-degree view, absolutely gorgeous. So we walked back with him and drove him back to his house, which is not far from the waterfall. And then turned around and drove all the way back that night and camped, so that the next morning we could start carrying our first load out to the top of the wall. So we did a back-breaking load carrying about 1,000 feet of rope, the drills, the bolts, a lot of water. And I think we carried a couple days of gear out, and basically decided we wanted to climb the longest, most continuous section. So we went right to the top of the formation, put a bolt in, and then found the nicest looking rock that we could and worked our way down. Picking our way through it, swinging left, swinging right, trying to find the nicest looking climbing that we could find, and basically made a bolted path down the wall. So for basically the next 6 weeks, we charged the drill batteries, hiked loads out to the top of the formation, hiked back, moved water, went back. So with the 3 of us, after this 6-week rotation, we figured out you would climb or work for 2 days and then maybe get a rest day. And on your rest day, maybe you wouldn't be on the wall, but you might just shuttle water out to the top of it and food. So we had a camp between the parking area where we had my truck and the camp on the summit. There's another view of charging some drill batteries on the summit. Here's a shot of Bert working his way down the wall. This is pretty high on the route. I want to say this is maybe only 2 or 3 pitches down. Luckily, we had very good weather starting in February. So basically, we were there for March and April. Temperatures were terrific. Basically had very little rain, some sprinkles every once in a while, and not that much sun on the wall, which helped, avoid getting too dehydrated and getting cooked. Shot. Some of the rock is absolutely gorgeous and very blank. Absolutely beautiful for face climbing. Not very different from a lot of rock in New Mexico. The top of the formation is very similar to some of the rock that you might find at Enchanted Tower down by Daddle, Pie Town. And as you go further down the wall, the rock tends to get harder, thinner, more brittle, so that as you get towards the bottom of the wall, it tends to look a little bit more like the dacite that you see in the dungeon. We're in a section in the middle here that is a little bit more like the welded tuff of Penitente, sometimes even a little Lost Conscious like. This section that you can see Burt on here is beautiful thin, just very subtle, very small features, sometimes small pockets. Beautiful. I think these are bromeliads. Absolutely some beautiful stuff down there. Beautiful flowers. This is getting down about maybe 10 pitches or so. It looks like we're trundling something off the wall here. This is, I believe, at the Critter Bivvy. So this is about 10 pitches down. This is the first major ledge that you would consider a bivouac on. And I believe we called it the Critter Bivvy first because we found this animal skeleton on it. I'm not sure what this, some kind of raccoon maybe. We continued to call it the Critter Bivvy after we spent a few nights on it because there were always critters climbing around on the ledge that wanted to eat our way into the haul bags and nibble on our food and eat the cords on the water bottles and slings. And so as always, even though some of this equipping the route is absolutely brutal manual labor, we tried to have as much fun as we can. Even though through all this work, it seems like you're not really rock climbing. All you're doing is hanging on the rope, hammering at it with a rock and trying to clean it off. Just being up there on the wall can be a lot of fun. This is somewhere through midway through the trip. I see this photo and it makes me feel exhausted. The camp just sort of looks disarray. There's stuff all over the place. To me, Burt looks incredibly tired. I can't remember if he's coming up for a lunch break or getting ready to head back down, but it basically the amount of work that it took going up and down the ropes day after day was just absolutely brutal, being covered in the dirt and the lichen that came off the wall and have that go down into your clothing and rub all your skin off, covered in sweat. Just absolutely exhausting. Does not make you feel like trying to do hard rock climbing after doing manual labor like this. It's so exhausting, but it is in one of the most beautiful places anywhere. Truly an absolutely gorgeous place. It's I think a super pretty shot showing the profile of El Higante against the side of the canyon there. This must be Burt coming up after some evening work there. Shot looking back out towards the Devil's Backbone. This is the route that we used to come from the car out to the top and back. It takes about an hour. This is a shot of the summit and that little fourth class bit. You have to scramble around to get up onto the top. Silly picture of me goofing off with some yuccas. So after, maybe we were there for 5 weeks. I think we had actually gone in to town, and I think we may have seen these guys, but we were sitting around camp in the morning. It was maybe 7 in the morning or so. And we're getting ready to head down the wall. And all of a sudden, these 2 guys show up and walk right up to the summit and kind of scared us a little bit, startled us because, we'd been out there for basically 5 weeks, gone into the village a couple times, but basically hadn't really seen anybody. And then all of a sudden, these 2 guys from Boulder, Colorado show up. And start getting their base jumping gear on. It was incredibly surprising. This is Jay Epstein. He owns a Mexican restaurant in Boulder. It was quite a shock to see these guys. And they were geared up to make the first base jump descent of El Higante. Just 2 days earlier, they had made the first jump off of the Cascada de Basa Sayachi. And I know if you look it up on YouTube, you can actually see the camera footage. It's kind of funny. You look at the cameras that these guys have on now, and it's kind of comical how large they are compared to the GoPro stuff that you see now. This is Damien Doucette. His partner Damien, I think, had done more jumps than Jay had. This guy, I think at the time had done like 500 jumps, some really crazy stuff. I know he jumped off the Bastille in El Dorado Canyon. If anybody's ever climbed that thing, it's only like 300 feet tall. I can't imagine jumping anything that short, but these guys just showed up and said, "Hey, where's a good place to jump from? Does this look good?" And we said, "Hey, we got fixed lines basically going all the way down the wall. You guys can go down this short little 4th class section at the top, and there's a good ledge." So they basically, within 15, 20 minutes of setting their gear up on top of the formation, they were ready to go out there early when the winds were calm. So they got their gear ready, and we kind of followed them down onto the good ledge. Bert was standing up on top. Peter and I were so excited to see this. We followed him all the way right down there so that we could watch him jump and take some pictures of him. Damien basically just unclipped and just got out there, got right on the edge, and started eyeing out exactly where he wanted to launch from. And before we knew it, he just went for it and launched off this thing. And I'd only seen base jumping once before. Actually, it was with Peter. After we climbed El Cap the first time, we watched a couple base jumpers go off. But it is truly something to watch somebody just hurl themselves off a cliff and watch them just, as they speed up, track away from the wall. They had no idea exactly where they were going to land, but these guys have done enough of this that they basically just start eyeing something as soon as they pop the chute. I kept thinking as he was falling, he kept getting closer and closer to one of these little bulges as he came out, but they continued to track away from the wall as they fell. So Damien jumped, Jay went about a minute behind him, and before we knew it, those guys were gone. And not long after that, it started to rain. So we never even went down under the wall that day. We watched them land safely in the river, and we just kind of went back up and sat on the top. And for whatever reason, after watching that, we all felt sort of incredibly depressed that we had basically been sitting out on this cliff going back and forth up and down this wall for 5 weeks. We weren't even sure we were going to have enough time to finish this route. These guys from Boulder showed up, did this amazing thing, and were gone, and had this, amazing success, and we're going to go off and go do something else fun. And we were still sitting here on top of this cliff, sort of wondering what was going to happen. So that it only lasted that day, but watching that was inspiring, but also just sort of frustrating to watch someone have success while we just sort of we're in our rut. But the sun came back out and we got back to work, and it wasn't long after that we decided we could no longer continue going up and down the wall because we just didn't have enough fixed rope. So we actually needed to cut the ropes from the top and continue wrapping all the way down the wall. So we cut ourselves from the rim and loaded up everything that we could. And I think we spent about 5 days on the wall, basically rigging back through the middle and then down through the lower section of the wall, trying to get all the way to the bottom. Here's Peter at this point, starting to get a little frustrated as we got onto the lower section of the wall. So after about 4 or 5 days on the wall, we eventually found the Stefan Glovac top of the sixth pitch where they finished their route, and we were able to link into that and wrap all the way to the ground. And that's just a little lower than this point. This is shot from the ground. And after looking at their route and seeing how they established it, they left some horribly dangerous loose blocks on it. We decided that we could not use that, and we completely deviated from it and ended up establishing 5 separate pitches to the left of theirs, but we ended up sharing the very first pitch because it was the easiest way to get through the jungle at the base of the wall. So we shared the first pitch, but did another separate 5 pitches, about 100 feet left of them. So we finally reached the base of the wall, kind of the exact opposite of what it's like to climb to the top of something. We made it to the bottom of the wall. So here we are, sort of yard sailing our gear after continuously wrapping down this 3,000-foot wall. And we finally got our first look at the entire cliff. I think it looks pretty spectacular for here. The top gets very foreshortened halfway up the wall. In this perspective is really about 2/3 up the wall, and you can see kind of a big roof with a dihedral system to the left of it. That's about halfway, maybe just a little over. The bottom of the canyon is almost like a different climate. The top is nearly 7,000 feet with that Chihuahua pine trees and jays, and at the bottom of the canyon it's palm trees and deciduous trees, and it's lush, and there's this gorgeous creek. So we all took a swim. I think we were down there for a few more days working on the bottom sections of the route. Shot through the trees here. And we actually went all the way back out to the top, figured out how we could get back down to the bottom of the wall. Peter and Bert actually went all the way up canyon. It's about a 4-hour hike, while I tried to walk all the way back up to the summit, and then I drove the truck back and met them. We kind of restocked our gear, got some fresh food and supplies, and then we made our way back, and then went all the way back down to the wall. And after finally equipping this thing, we left ourselves with about one attempt. I think we had 4 days to go up the wall and just try to free climb everything that we could up the wall. This is Bert on the very first pitch, the one that is shared by the Stefan Glovac ascent. This is Peter a little higher up on the route. Basically the first pitch, the first 10 pitches or so are all about 5'10", 5'11". And then when you hit about pitch 10, you start hitting some real difficulties, and things start getting real hard. Here's a shot of Bert hanging out in the belay here. This is Bert on a traverse pitch that's one of the easier ones. Here's Peter in the belay. So the first day on the route is mostly 5'10", 5'11" climbing with a 1 5'12" pitch, And then basically on day 2, you get a very hard 513 pitch that we weren't able to red point. That's pretty much the crux of the route. After that, you get more 512 with some 511. This is about a 12A pitch. Climbs very similar to some of the stuff at the dungeon. Lots of flakes and side pulls and underclings. Here's a shot of Bert on the 513 pitch. We all tried to red point it. Bert got very close. Did it with one hang, I think, several times. We called this pitch the passage because it sort of changes the whole character of the route once you reach this pitch. This is sort of the end of that section. This is Peter on the Critter Bivvy, about 2/3 of the way up the route. From this bivvy, this is about pitch 18. Most parties spend 1 day to get to the top from here. Almost every pitch to the top from here, except for the very last ones, are all 512 and 513, with the exception of the very last one, which is 510. Absolutely brutal on the last day. And after climbing for a couple days on this thing, when you're waking up in the morning, the very first thing that you get is a 12 B Dihedral. This pitch is like 80 feet long. It's super technical. I think I bolted this one and just got my butt kicked that morning trying to get up this thing. It was just absolutely brutal. Very hard pitch. So this is me after falling off it, I think. So this is us in the same spot, hauling the bags up, working our way up the route. We're quite happy with the way it turned out. Obviously, we weren't able to red point a couple of the very hard pitches, but it has some absolutely stunning climbing on it. This is gorgeous pitch. Shot of Peter in the belay here. Peter on another 512 pitch. So here's a shot of Bert topping out, kind of concluding our trip here. Here's Peter. And here's the three of us. And that was the trip. So that's basically how it went down. About a year after we got back, Klettern, this German magazine, ran a story that basically explained what we had done in Basa Sayachi, and the climbing community did not, they weren't happy about it. A very famous climber named Alex Huber tried to organize a international group to go down there and chop the route because they thought anyone establishing a route that way, no one should ever do that. It's not how it's ever been done, and it's just against the way that all climbing should be done. It needs to be done in a much slower and less invasive way. Nothing ever happened. There were many people who obviously weren't happy with the way that we had done it, but there were more people who agreed with the way that we had done it, and it just sort of went away. The American Alpine Journal ran a really nice story called the Logical Dilemma. One of the things that upset a lot of climbers was the route. the name that we gave it, logical progression, which they felt, yeah, they don't want rat bolting to be a logical progression. They don't want climbing to evolve this way. So 4 years later, after our ascent, Sylvain Mallet, Arnaud Petit, and a few other Frenchmen went down to the wall and made a near on-site first free ascent of our route, basically climbing all 28 pitches without falling. I think Sylvain fell one time on one of the 513 pitches. There's two of them, basically just because the hole broke and it was a little dirty. Sylvain Mallet is one of the strongest rock climbers in the world. If you've ever heard of a route called Biography, it was one of the first 15 A's in the world, 9A plus, French grade, something like that. They went down there, made the first free ascent in 2006, called the route absolutely amazing. They thought we did a really nice job and they really enjoyed the route. After those guys had said that, the route started to get traffic. 1 or 2 parties a year, then maybe 4 or 5 parties a year. And 20 years later, I'm not sure how many ascents the route's had now, but it's had some very good climbers go down there and really enjoy it. I would think that's the way that any route should be done and thought about. If you're going to make a new route, it should be done in a way like a community service project so that people can enjoy it to its fullest. And I think that's kind of what happened here. So I'll end it at that and let Beth take questions if anybody if anybody's still there, if anybody can hear me.
All right. Sorry about that. I was getting one
No,
last
no,
question
yeah.
off the chat. Thanks so much, Luke. If you want to just make one of those photos full screen so we can have that to look at, and I'll start on some questions. So the first one was about actually your first set of photos that you showed. They wanted to know if anyone had repeated the Ghost Ranch Tower route. I think somebody even said they had heard about your stick situation. I forget what it was, the hoop stick.
Yeah, the
right?
hoop sticking. Cameron would be the one to ask him. Cameron Burns is one of the most tower climbing obsessed people probably anywhere. He's climbed hundreds of towers all over the place, and he climbed almost every summit in Ghost Ranch, as crumbly as they may seem. And they're absolutely horrible. That's some of the worst sandstone I've seen anywhere. I don't believe Count Rudy has been repeated, but there are several, one of the biggest towers in Ghost Ranch, that's been climbed several times now. I wouldn't recommend anyone going in there and climbing those. That rock is truly horrible.
Good to know. Okay.
Go climb some better sandstone.
All right, and then back to Mexico. It sounds like you needed permissions from the parks, the national parks, to bolt the routes, plus cleaning and camping and related work. Was it hard to get? Who'd you talk to? What
There's no park
there?
administration, as far as we know. We never met anyone with the Park Service. I've been there 4 times. I made two more trips down to Logical Progression, just to see if I could climb some more pitches on it, see if I could red point it. One of the guys I went there with, Rob Pism, got really close to red pointing it. But in all those trips going down there, never met anyone from the Park Service. It's a national park, but there really isn't any way to protects that in any way. And actually, you know, one other comment I should add is that obviously what we did had tremendous impact in making this route, you know, causes more people to come here, which, you know, if not done well, can be dangerous for an environment like that, because it is a wilderness area. The base jumpers, Jay and Damien, who were down there, the year after we did this trip, I went down a couple years later to try the route again. And when I went back, so that they could land a helicopter on the summit of El Higante, they sent a clearing crew out there and leveled the oak forest on top of it. We were absolutely shocked. It was so awful. The summit of El Higante had this beautiful old growth oak that we made our camp in, and we could hang our tarps in. And it was just this beautiful protected sheltered area. And so that they could land a helicopter up there, they basically clear cut a pad right in the middle of it. And they cut a football field near where we're standing in this photo so that they could land a helicopter at the base of the wall and make a base jumping landing pad. So unfortunately, there really is no Park Service that is managing this. And if there is, you know, it's Mexico, and a lot of it would be sort of motivated to encourage activities that might bring more tourists. And I, you know, when these base jumpers went down there with the helicopter, they rented a helicopter from somebody, and that money went, maybe some of it went to the park. I don't know, but yeah. Park Service isn't like it is in the United States. It's not always there to protect.
Yikes, interesting. Yeah, definitely a different definition of national park and Park Service. And
yeah.
And Peter's actually chiming in on the chat, and he said, yeah, basically there's no park admin, and you all were like kids in a candy shop there.
Yeah.
All right, so the next question, I think you might have mentioned this, but remind us, what was the timeline on the waterfall route? How many days of cleaning versus climbing?
Like 10 to 1. We were there for a month, and I really think we spent no more than 2 or 3 days trying to climb it. And you know, for logical progression, it was much worse. We really spent so little time actually climbing on it compared to how much time we spent going up and down the route, just trying to get, you know, lower down on the wall to finally finish bolting it. It was such such labor, moving ropes and, you know, sending one person down with a battery and bolts just to get, you know, one pitch lower. I mean, if we could do one pitch a day, obviously you could do the whole thing in a month, but it's never that easy trying to, you know, put this thing together, because, you know, sometimes on this route we couldn't figure out where we should go, and, you know, you had to make decisions when you entered a section of rock that looked too difficult or sometimes too loose. You know, sometimes you had to retreat and kind of come back up and maybe figure out, you know, if this was really the way to go. So slow going.
Okay, thanks. This is all in the same massive, right? So is it all limestone? What kind of rock?
This is all volcanic. This entire region it's some kind of, I'm not a geologist. It's all it varies. So as I was saying earlier, on the top of it, if anybody's ever been to the Enchanted Tower and seen, it's like it's a soft, very light colored. I think it's harder than our bandolier tuff. It's like an ash flow. It's a compressed ash, and it's got tons of pockets in it, the vesicles. And as you get lower down the wall, the rock tends to get a little bit more compact. And as you get to the very bottom of the wall, the rock is darker. Is that mafic? So it's more like a dacite. And I believe, reading some of the geology, they talk about andesites. But a majority of it is this sort of compressed, welded tuff that I would guess is, some of it is probably older than the volcanic rocks that we see around in the Los Alamos area and the Jemez. All entirely volcanic. And
Wow,
most
okay,
of the
yeah,
stuff near the rim is all that Enchanted Tower style tuff, the ash flow stuff.
all right. And Peter said rhyolith.
Oh, rhyolites, yeah. Rhyolites are so I was corrected recently for calling this rhyolite. My understanding was that the rhyolite is the much lighter colored rock, which is I think there's felsic and mafic. And I'm not a geologist. The felsic tends to be the lighter colored stuff, where the mafic tends to be more like a dacite. So if you look at like the Las Conchas formations, that has a lot of those lighter colored minerals and the stuff that makes up the ash there, and the dacites, which is more like what the dungeon is. And we always called the dungeon and some of those rocks rhyolite, but somebody said that that's not true. So maybe there's a geologist in the group that can correct what I'm saying, or might know something about this. So some of it definitely is sort of that rhyolite stuff, but a lot of it is the darker stuff.
All right. So you said you didn't free climb the hardest sections or some of the pitches.
Yeah.
How did you get up them, and what did the following parties do differently?
So with a lot of those pitches, we were climbing and then falling off, and then we would just get right back on and just keep going and finish the pitch after falling on it a couple times. And other times, you would climb and just try to grab the bolt, because there was no, if you didn't do that, you were just going to pitch off again. And so on a lot of routes, they call it an obligatory grade. You have to climb approximately 512 just to even get up the route. So we called the route 512B or C, obligatory. If you don't climb about that hard, you're not going to be able to pull through some of the sections in order to clip the bolts. I think we called it like 512 obligatory /513 is what or I think originally we might have even called it 12D, which is kind of a sandbag, as the two harder pitches are definitely in the 513 range. So because it's a bolted route, you could also get up it with a stick clip if you wanted to, but that probably wouldn't be that much fun, and you might want to find something else to do.
All right, thanks. Someone asked us to explain what red point means.
Red point means trying the route over and over and over again until you finally do it. So when you on-site something, you do it your very first try without any knowledge. If you flash something, you do it on your first try, but somebody's given you all the knowledge and told you how to do it maybe. In a red point, you have tried the route before and you know exactly what you need to do. So it is the sort of the culmination of your experience on the route finally succeeding after trying multiple times on something. And that is the term, the Rockpunt. I think, well, the Germans can correct me if my pronunciation's bad, but basically, yeah, I'm sure the Germans are laughing at me right now, but basically that is the term that Kurt Albert came up with to explain the term of trying a route over and over again until you finally succeed on it. And Kurt Albert, I'll point out again, was one of the guys who made the first ascent of Subiendo El Arco Iris right after Stefan Glovac.
Thank you. Did you leave all bolts and hangers on the routes, or did you clean anything?
No, it's equipped. It's ready to go. In fact, the wisdom on the route now is when you arrive at the top, rather than walk all the way around the cliff, what parties like to do is start at the top and rappel all the way down all 28 pitches and hang water and leave supplies on the route so that you have less to haul when you come back up. And then you can check out pitches and you might tick a couple key holds and you can kind of scope the route out. So you can forget about your on-site if you do that, because you're kind of pre-inspecting the route and checking it out. But because of that, there are slings and there's little extra bits of gear all the way down the route now. But it's totally equipped. All you need is quick draws.
Wow. Okay. Did you have sponsorships?
We had no sponsorships. I actually tried to get some, and I think when people heard about what we wanted to do, they sort of laughed at us, which is fine.
Oh no.
we're all sort of dirtbags, so we were okay with that.
All right. So you actually just mentioned this, but can you access the canyon below El Higante, or did later climbers wrap down from the top, like you guys did?
So we actually on our first trip we basically knew where El Higante was, but we weren't sure what the easiest way to get there was, and we considered when you're at Subiendo at the top of the Cascada de Basa Sayachi, when you're there, there's a trail that goes down to the bottom of the waterfall there, which is how you climb Subiendo if you're going back up it. If you go down the side of the waterfall there, you can walk down canyon and eventually you'll end up at El Higante. You know, the Tarahumara, who were sort of famous runners, you know, the famous mountain runners, crisscrossed all over these canyons, but they never really left any trails down there. They're just so light, and I think the vegetation down there, and it's also very rugged at the bottom of the canyon, and probably few people have gone down there. It is a very, very faint trail. It's mostly scrambling from the base of this wall all the way up that way. And if you drive to the summit and try to go around the side and come down, it's basically a bushwhack down a sometimes very steep slope where you're just hanging onto trees and kind of bushwhacking your way down into the canyon. It's a rugged place.
Sure, it looks like it.
And I think that's why people opt to just wrap down the route.
Right. All right. How do you divide up the work when bolting with a team of 3? Who decides the line?
Basically, you know, it really was a team effort, and our main goal was always find the nicest looking climbing. And sometimes the climbing was hard, but we always wanted to choose the best looking rock that, you know, was climbing. You know, all 3 of us have done some hard climbing, so we'd all put up routes before, and we all basically, you know, knew what to look for, and we trust each other to find the best thing that we can. But basically just take turns kind of in rotation, working our way down the wall. Sometimes we might go a few pitches further down the wall and leave a chunk that hadn't quite been finished bolting. So somebody might work on a section up there and, just try not to knock rocks on the people below you.
All right, thank you. We had a couple people just note that these are incredible routes, just an amazing accomplishment. Somebody said, "I'm glad you're able to weather the criticism." And the next question, does the climbing lean harder because there aren't many features on the rock itself? It looks so featured when you're looking at the rock face in these photos taken from a distance.
Yeah, I think the wall is also sometimes steeper than it looks. You look at like in this photo, and you would think, maybe the climb is less than vertical for the majority of it. And there are some lower angle pitches, but I think there's quite a bit of steeper climbing too. And a lot of the features are fairly thin. But it's the sustained nature of it, and also our choice of line that we were able to weave through some of the sharper looking features, and there's some really pronounced arêtes and really smooth faces. A lot of times when you find those beautiful sections of rock, they are a lot cleaner. So there are some pretty thin features, and a lot of the climbing is very finger intensive.
Wow, yeah, those grades are up there.
Yeah, there's some as anybody wants to, you can go to Mountain Project and they have a full topo, but I think that more than half of the route is 512 or harder. So that's like, 14 pitches or something that are all very, very hard.
Wow. All right. Are both climbs considered in the Copper Canyon?
No, technically they're Basa Sayachi National Park. They call it the Copper Canyon region. Even though, as the crow flies, I think it's actually not much more than 50 or 60 miles, but driving wise, from Basa Sayachi, it might take you 3 or 4 hours to drive into Copper Canyon over down to Creel. Maybe not 3. It's some of the roads are very twisty and curvy and not fast as you get up into the mountains there. So it's slow, circuitous, indirect driving.
All right. So we're coming down to the last couple of questions, so if anybody has any more, go ahead and type them into the chat. I'm still watching there. Anna asks, looking back, is there anything you would do differently?
Well, I don't know. I am proud of the route that we created, but sometimes I wonder, could we have just gone climbing in Kalymnos and drank beer at night and sat by the ocean and climbed somebody else's 512 routes and probably done a lot more climbing? Yes. Yeah, I mean, we could have done that, but I think one of the things that's always attracted me to climbing is the adventure aspect, and being part of a team and doing something like that, something that's not just about your singular goal of trying to do this one thing. I had an amazing experience with Peter and Dirk when we did Subiendo, and I think the second trip, was also absolutely awesome with Peter and Bert. So, yeah, it's a lifelong friendship with these guys, and I've gone to Germany a couple times since then to see those guys, and climbed in Italy, and we climbed in Chamonix. Our families all know each other, so yeah, I don't think I would change it, even if Alex Huber wants to come beat me up because he didn't like the way I did it.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Oh, it looks like Bert actually is on, and he said, thanks so much for this this little early morning trip. And it was unforgettable. Lots of people saying great presentation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Amazing effort. And Bert wants to know when you guys are going back.
Yeah, I guess when it's safe to go back, right? And you guys can travel, and the Euros can travel over here.
Right, when everything's allowed.
Yeah, we can't go to Europe really.
We can't wait to see them.
Yeah, it's hard to move around right now.
All right. Well, you got Peter close to tears. He says thanks, and just more good luck. And somebody wants to know if you have any future trips planned.
No. So
or I guess when you can plan them.
Yeah. Nothing yet. I think we're all waiting to see when and where we can go once this is lifted. Nothing but local stuff for now.
All right. Well, yeah, a lot of people saying they'll see you out on the local stuff. Dirk is on. He says, nice presentation. He hopes to see you soon. And Bert says, you better get out before you need a wheelchair. and I think that's, oh gosh, of course. One more question. How can you tell where good bolt placements are without climbing up?
I don't know. That's why it's easier to do it on rappel, so you can bang on the rock first and know that it's solid.
I think it's more of judging. He was asking about where do you judge where to place placement location.
Where you can reach and where the rock sounds solid. Yeah.
All right.
And it's easiest.
And Peter says by experience.
When you're not hanging on something, it's better to be way up above it.
All right. Oh, how long will the bolts last?
Well, Peter was smart enough to buy all stainless steel bolts and hangers for this route. So, this is something that the climbing world will continue to evaluate. How long will certain kinds of bolts last in certain kind of environments? Bolts do have to be replaced. A lot of bolts that were placed in the 80s and 90s have been replaced, sometimes because the gear was bad, other times because it just gets used and people hanging on it and spinning it and getting heavily worked. Sometimes it's not so much that the gear was bad. Sometimes it just gets worn out. So it'll kind of depend how much use this route gets and how wet the rock gets. There's a lot of factors that determine how long something like that can last, but stainless steel can last a long time. So I don't really know.
All right. I think that was it for all the questions that came in for you. Luke, thank you again so much for sharing with us tonight. And everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in. If you'd like to join us again, we have these talks most Tuesday nights, and in our usual astronomy talk, our next one is this Friday evening about the life and death of the sun. And you can go to Peak's website for more information and to register for those. But we'll see you guys again soon, and thank you so much again for tuning in. A lot of people writing in on the chat. Thanks so much to you, Luke. Thanks for sharing.
Hey, thanks for coming, everybody. I appreciate it. Thanks for your patience listening to me.
Thanks so much for sharing your stories. Those were great. All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks again.
All right, good night.